Rena sat on the front porch as the sky slowly changed color above her small street. The wooden steps felt warm under her feet from the long day of sun. She waited for her mother, who worked late at the clinic every evening. The street was quiet and calm, with only the sound of a distant radio and leaves moving in the soft wind. Rena liked this time of day because it felt safe and slow. She hugged her knees and watched shadows stretch across the road. She did not know that this calm evening was about to change her life forever. A sudden sound broke the silence and made Rena lift her head. It was not a car or a person calling out. It was a low crying sound that carried pain and fear. Rena stood up slowly and looked toward the sidewalk. A large police dog stood near the edge of her yard. Its body was tense and its ears were lowered. Its eyes were wide and full of tears. Rena had seen police dogs before, and they were always strong and fearless. This one looked broken and desperate. The dog took a slow step forward and then another. It stopped near the porch and sat down heavily. A soft cry came from its throat and echoed in the quiet air. Rena felt her heart tighten as she watched it. The dog lifted one paw and placed it on the lowest step as if asking for help. Its breathing was uneven, and its chest moved fast. Rena felt scared but also felt that the dog needed her. She could not turn away from its eyes. Rena called out for her mother, but there was no answer. The house behind her was still and quiet. She looked back at the dog and swallowed hard. The dog lowered its head and nudged the metal tag on its collar. A small camera attached to the collar blinked with a weak red light. Rena noticed dark marks on the dog's fur that looked old and dry. Her hands began to shake as fear slowly filled her chest. She knew something was very wrong. The dog stood up suddenly and turned toward the street. It took a few steps and then stopped. It looked back at Rena and cried again. The sound was louder now and full of urgency. Rena felt pulled forward as if an invisible string was guiding her. She stepped off the porch and onto the sidewalk. Her legs felt weak, but she kept moving. The dog began walking slowly and carefully. It looked back again and again to make sure she followed. They walked past quiet houses and dark windows. The streetlights flickered on one by one. Rena's breath felt short as they turned a corner she rarely used. At the end of the road stood an old, empty house. The paint was peeling and weeds covered the yard. The dog stopped in front of the door and began to scratch at it. It cried loudly and pressed its body against the wood. Rena felt cold all over and her skin turned pale. From inside the house came a faint sound that barely reached her ears. It was weak and broken and full of pain. Rena froze as her mind tried to understand what she was hearing. The dog barked once and then cried again. Its body shook as it stayed close to the door. Rena felt fear but also felt a strong need to act. She knew someone inside needed help and time was running out. Rena turned and ran back toward her home as fast as she could. Her voice rose into the night as she screamed for help. Lights turned on in nearby houses and doors opened. People stepped outside with confused faces. Rena kept shouting and pointing down the street. The police dog followed her closely and did not stop crying. That night the quiet street woke up to fear and urgency. And it all began with a crying police dog on a small porch asking a little girl to listen. Rena stood near her porch as neighbors gathered around her with worried faces. The street no longer felt quiet and safe. People spoke softly while looking at the police dog who stayed close to Rena. The dog's body was tense and its eyes kept moving toward the dark corner of the road. Rena pointed again and again toward the old, empty house. Her hands shook as she tried to explain what she had seen. The fear inside her chest had not faded. A man from the next house used his phone to call for help. Others tried to calm Rena by speaking gently. The police dog began to pull forward again and cried loudly. Its sound carried pain and urgency. Rena felt tears fill her eyes as she watched it. She knew the dog was afraid of being too late. She also knew she could not ignore that fear. Soon flashing lights appeared at the end of the street. A police car arrived and stopped near the crowd. Two officers stepped out and looked around quickly. The dog reacted at once and pulled hard toward the old house. One officer noticed the badge on the collar and spoke softly to calm it. Rena stepped forward and explained what the dog had shown her. Her voice was quiet but steady. The officers listened closely. The group moved together toward the empty house. Each step felt heavy to Rena. The dog stayed at the front and cried softly as it reached the door again. The door was locked and worn from age. One officer forced it open with a strong push. The sound echoed through the empty building. Rena stood outside holding her breath. Inside the house the air felt thick and cold. The dog rushed forward without hesitation. The officers followed quickly. Rena waited outside with a neighbor who held her shoulders gently. She could hear voices inside calling out. Her heart beat fast as she tried to stay calm. Moments later the officers carried a man out on a stretcher. He wore a torn police uniform and his face was pale. His breathing was weak but steady. The dog stayed close and whined softly as it walked beside him. Rena felt her knees weaken as relief washed over her. The fear slowly turned into heavy emotion. An ambulance arrived and took the man away for care. One officer came back and knelt in front of Rena. He thanked her and told her she had been very brave. Rena nodded slowly and wiped her eyes. She did not feel brave. She had only listened. The dog finally relaxed and sat beside her. Its crying stopped and it rested its head near her leg. Rena gently touched its fur and felt how warm it was. She understood then that the dog had trusted her when it had no one else. That trust had saved a life. As the night settled again, the crowd slowly returned home. Rena stayed on her porch with the dog beside her. The street was quiet once more, but everything felt different. She looked at the dark road with new eyes. She knew this was not just an ordinary night. It was the night she learned that even a small voice can answer a great call for help. Morning light slowly spread across the small street as Rena woke up with heavy eyes. The events of the night stayed fresh in her mind. She sat up in bed and listened to the sounds outside. Everything felt normal again, but her heart knew something had changed. She remembered the crying police dog and the fear in its eyes. She remembered the old house and the weak sounds from inside. Those memories did not fade with sleep. Rena's mother sat beside her and held her hand gently. She had listened quietly to everything that happened the night before. Her face showed worry and pride at the same time. She told Rena that sometimes ordinary people are placed in important moments. Rena did not fully understand those words, but she felt their meaning deep inside. She nodded slowly and looked toward the window. Later that morning a police car stopped in front of the house. The same officer from the night before stepped out. He walked up to the porch and smiled kindly. Rena stepped forward with her mother standing close behind. The officer told her that the injured officer was now safe and receiving care. He explained that without her help things could have ended very differently. Rena listened quietly with her hands folded together. The officer also brought the police dog back to the porch. The dog walked calmly now with steady steps. Its eyes were clear and peaceful. When it saw Rena, it moved closer and sat beside her again. It did not cry this time. It only watched her with trust. Rena felt warmth fill her chest as she gently touched its fur. News of the night spread through the neighborhood. People stopped by to thank Rena and to speak kindly to her. Some brought small gifts while others brought only words. Rena felt shy and overwhelmed by the attention. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like a girl who listened when someone needed help. At school, teachers spoke softly to her and classmates looked at her with new respect. Rena sat quietly at her desk and thought about the dog. She wondered how long it had been searching for help. She wondered how afraid it must have felt. Those thoughts stayed with her through the day. That afternoon Rena's mother took her to visit the injured officer at the hospital. The building smelled clean and bright lights filled the hallways. The officer lay in a bed and looked tired but alive. When he saw Rena he smiled weakly. He thanked her with a voice full of emotion. Rena stood still and listened as her heart beat fast. The police dog lay near the bed watching closely. It did not move far from the officer. Rena understood then how strong their bond was. The dog had protected its partner until the very end. It had refused to leave even when it was afraid. Rena felt deep respect for the animal beside her. On the way home, Rena looked out the car window and watched the streets pass by. Everything looked the same, but she felt different inside. She realized that fear does not always mean weakness. Sometimes fear guides someone to do the right thing. That thought stayed with her as the days passed. That evening Rena returned to her porch and sat in the same spot as before. The street lights turned on one by one. The air felt calm again. She looked down the road where the dog first appeared. She smiled softly and felt grateful. She knew she would never forget the night she answered a silent cry for help. Weeks passed and life slowly returned to its usual rhythm on the small street. Rena went back to school each day and helped her mother at home in the evenings. Yet something inside her had changed forever. She noticed small details she once ignored, like the way people avoided eye contact, or how silence sometimes meant more than words. She had learned that listening could be a powerful act. That lesson stayed close to her heart. One afternoon a police car stopped outside her house again. This time there were no flashing lights or worried faces. The officer stepped out calmly and smiled. Rena recognized him at once. He told her that the injured officer had fully recovered and would soon return to duty. Rena felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her hands pressed together as she smiled back. The officer invited Rena and her mother to a small gathering at the local station. Rena felt nervous but curious. When the day arrived, she wore her simple dress and held her mother's hand tightly. Inside, the station officers stood together with gentle smiles. The injured officer walked toward her slowly and bent down to her level. He thanked her again with deep sincerity. The police dog walked beside him with calm confidence. It no longer showed fear or pain. Its steps were steady and proud. When it reached Rena, it sat and looked up at her with bright eyes. Rena knelt and hugged its neck gently. The room felt warm with quiet emotion. The officer spoke about courage and trust. He said heroes are not always loud or strong. Sometimes they are quiet and kind. Everyone listened closely. Rena felt her cheeks grow warm. She did not feel like a hero, but she understood the meaning of his words. After the gathering, Rena and her mother walked home together. The sun was setting and the sky glowed softly. Rena thought about how one small moment had changed so many lives. She felt thankful for the chance she had been given. Days later, Rena returned to her porch once more. She sat in the same place as the night everything began. The street was calm and familiar. Children played nearby and neighbors waved as they passed. Life felt gentle again. As the evening grew quiet, Rena heard a familiar sound. The police dog appeared at the corner of the street, walking beside the recovered officer. They stopped near her house. The officer waved and smiled proudly. The dog looked at Rena and wagged its tail slowly. Rena stood and waved back with a bright smile. She felt a sense of peace settle inside her. She knew that courage lived in small moments and kind choices. She understood that listening could save lives. That night Rena went to bed feeling calm and strong. She closed her eyes knowing she would always remember the night she answered a silent cry. She had learned that even a small heart can carry great courage.